Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Rosa and Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Vanis Chavla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunello Rosa. This week, we're keeping our eyes on the one headline that everyone is, which is the U.S. presidential race at a crossroads. There's, quite a few interesting trends going on. Lenin once quipped, of course, that, there are weeks where decades happen and decades where weeks happen. Certainly seems like this last couple of weeks was one of those where decades happened. But let's start
Yes.
with perhaps the first shock event. Former President Donald Trump suffered an attempted assassination, possibly just millimeters or centimeters away. Brunello, what was the impact of this?
So the impact was, from a media perspective, of course, huge. For days, that was the only subject for discussion, also because former President Trump showed in all his rallies with a huge patch on his ear. So I just wanted everybody to remember that episode, even if there have been some other indications, for example, pictures from the Associated Press showing that already now the ear is in perfectly good shape. It's like nothing has ever happened. So this will continue feeding all those sorts of conspiracy theories that we discussed in a previous podcast. So there's no point in returning to that. The key point is, has this had a great impact on polls? Not really. Even before Biden decided not to run, and we'll discuss this later, the impact on polls were minimal. But what happened was that the shooting occurred just a few days before the beginning um, of the Republican convention, in which Trump was in fact officially anointed as the Republican nominee. And as we know, the key point in that event was the nomination of J.D. Vance as his running mate and potentially vice president and, of course, Speaker of the Senate by definition. So I think this is by far the most interesting thing that we should be discussing by now.
Yeah, and let's hone in on Vance because he's taken quite the U-turn on his political views. He used to be a so-called never Trumper, compared Trump to Hitler once, but now he's very much the face of the future of the MAGA movement and the Republican Party. So, I mean, what does Vance espouse really, and what does him being on the ticket signify?
Yeah, I mean, Vance's appointment is um, quite remarkable. Anthony Scaramucci, as you know, it was one of the most contested hires of Trump in his first presidency, said, I'm so glad that J.D. Vance, kicked me out of the position, the worst hire ever made by Trump.
Hmm.
And he said people thought it was impossible, but J.D. Vance managed to do that. His views are really radical, and they've changed over time. As you said, he was a never Trumper, used to say that Trump was America's Hitler, that kind of stuff. And now it becomes the face of MAGA. Well, that's politics for you. But some of his views have not changed. Ultra conservatives on family values. He promotes a nationwide ban on abortion and similar practice. And then he even said that people with kids should have more of a voting power than people without kids. And here is like, wait a minute. In my column, I remind everybody the Declaration of Independence, the beginning of it, which says that all men are created equal. And that's the foundation of the US democracy, because if all men are created equal, then everybody has the same voting rights. By definition, let's not forget that the US was born when in Europe there was still the absolute kingdoms and all that kind of very kind of autocratic. Today we would say autocratic regime. Clearly, that was a different period. But the point was, forget about democracy. It would be enough to have some form of liberal reforms in Europe. So all men are created equal means everybody has the same voting right. Everybody is one man, one vote, and then eventually, as we know, one man and woman and one vote. So, these are attacks to the foundation of the US democracy. And that's why we think this is very much consistent with what we have seen in Project 2025. We have already discussed that. And J.D. Vance itself endorses this document. And if it wasn't enough, during the same days, Trump said to the Christians that were rallying for him, said, just go and vote for me only this time, because in 4 years, everything would be fixed. You would not need to vote again, which is kind of strange. People start interrogating, what do you mean? There's not going to be votes again? You're going to run again, but without calling an election? All that kind of rhetoric that is really not reassuring for the US democracy.
Yeah. And then following this on the Democrat side, I mean, the second big shock of the race, but perhaps not so much a shock given that senior Democrats were calling for it weeks in advance, was the decision by Joe Biden to drop out for the, quote unquote, greater good of the country and the party. What led to this decision? What will Biden's legacy be?
I think Biden realized that it was very hard to run against his own party and the donors of his party. And the pressures had increased a lot before his decision. And he reached the real top. Pelosi, Schumer, and even Obama, even if not as overtly as others, but clearly he made it clear that he should give up. And that's because in such a critical moment for the US democracy, we have just spoken about, what is it? The Democrats have nothing better to offer than a president who has an outstanding legacy. I'll say that in a second, but is clearly on his declining phase and hard to fight. Somebody that is still in good shape, such as Trump. So he decided to step down. I think is the right decision, although we will see that changing a candidate so close to the elections is not as easy as people made it for a variety of reasons. But his legacy has been remarkable. And a number of commentators, including Zakaria and others, have reminded that 50 million 50 million jobs created since the beginning of his presidency, the approval of a wide-ranging infrastructure plan that America desperately needs in terms of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a new version of the Build Back Better America plan that was in fact initially launched by Biden himself, not to, of course, forget the staunch defense of Ukraine against the Russian aggression. So, he has achieved remarkable results in only effectively 3.5 years. But just to defend his legacy, I think he did the right move in stepping outside the race.
Yeah. And I mean, last question really quickly is the endorsement to Kamala Harris, who's, just in a matter of days now become effectively the de facto nominee of the Democrat Party. Many commentators I've heard saying that her start to the race has been as good as she could have possibly hoped for, raising record amounts of money, getting all the endorsements she needed from senior Democrats. The real question is, I mean, who does she put on the ticket? Who is her vice presidential candidate? And what are her odds of going neck and neck against Trump?
Yes, I mean, that would be the real question for the national convention that will occur in August, after quickly allying all the other grandees of the party, not just the Pelosi's of the world, and of course Biden, who endorsed there, but the Gavin Newsom that could possibly have been one of the potential candidates, the governor of California. But other governors, such as John Shapiro from Pennsylvania, Roy Cooper from North Carolina. These were very, very credible contenders. However, as you said, the beginning was super strong. Plenty of money flew into her coffins, and therefore is now, the momentum is there. There's no point in choosing somebody else, I don't think. So the question is, who's gonna she choose as running mate? And here the decision will be very, very important. Some people suggest Buttigieg, who I think would be a fantastic running mate, but we all know that he runs also for the gay community, and I don't think America is ready for that kind of ticket just yet. We shouldn't confuse what we see from Europe or in other jurisdictions and confusing with what America deeply is outside the liberal coast and let alone California. So if Trump is so strong nationwide, it means that there is this so strong, deeply conservative approach in America. And so I think she will choose for somebody that might appeal to those moderate Republicans that in fact could switch from supporting Trump in a very kind of in a manner that they don't really like, to potentially voting for Kamala Harris and a running mate, even if they're not totally convinced, but they are still they may be more scared of having Trump than having Kamala Harris. So I think that would be the key decision for her to make during the convention.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with a sort of almost 100 days to go until election day in the United States, and with how consequential this is as an election, it really couldn't be perhaps more exciting, but also to many people more stressful as a presidential race. I think it's worth reminding people that it's not worth jumping to conclusions too quickly. There's still so much that could change if the next few weeks are anything like the weeks that preceded us. So much to watch and things that we'll be covering very closely. But as always, Brunello, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you very much. Until next time.